filthy little hobbitses. Master tricked us.
What's going on here?
Go away and never come back. We'll be right back.
It's time to heed the soft whisper. It's time to do or to die.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland, and tonight we're going to do a part 2 on editing sound in the app LumaFusion. Now, a lot of the information that we're going to be covering tonight is information that you can carry over to whatever app or program that you decide to edit your videos in. Of course, our favorite app is the Pro app, LumaFusion, and as I've mentioned before, it is a bit expensive. That is for an app. When you consider alternatives like Final Cut Pro that costs $300, the $50 that you would pay for LumaFusion is really quite a deal, especially when the vast amount of the editing that you're going to encounter can be accomplished just as well on LumaFusion as it can in Final Cut Pro, especially if you're editing on an iPad Pro. Now, as you can see, I've dusted off Shift Screen 4X and brought up our YouTube studio online. Of course, we've covered that we've reached over 12,000 views. Just since I mentioned that, we're closer to 13,000 than we are to 12. Not to mention another 5 subscribers for a total of 145. But one of the things that we haven't mentioned on the channel before is watch hours. Of course, our goal is to reach those 500 community leaders, our first 500 subscribers. And we're right on track in achieving that goal. But another important milestone has been accomplished here on the channel, and I thought I'd share it with you. In addition to all those amazing views, evidently people are actually watching through our videos. Can you imagine that? Anyway, the long and short of it is that we have achieved our first 1,000 watch hours. The fact that someone has spent 1,000 hours watching our videos amazes me. But that's nothing that we've done here on the channel. That's all you. Some of our subscribers and our viewers are actually sharing our videos. A shout out to Steve Ledford, Vicky Addison, as well as a recent share by Donna Davis. Thank you, Donna. These 3 are but a few who have shared our videos, and it's through sharing those videos that our watch hours have increased. So a big shout out to every single one of you. If you've been watching and you've been thinking of subscribing, just hit that subscribe to the tribe button. Then hit that top bell notification and you'll be notified of all future tutorials and videos as they come out. Alright, so on the screen behind me tonight is a different screen than I've ever shown on the channel. For those of you who are familiar with recording music, this isn't an unfamiliar scene at all. Here we see various sound clips as they've been dropped in, and this is where we have an overall view of our music and all the tracks that we have laid down for a particular song or number. Nothing really new here. This is a window that's fairly familiar. Looks a little different than, say, GarageBand or other favorite editing apps. But basically, you generally usually get a view like this. Now, the app that I've opened up is another $50 professional app. You can get a version of it for $19.99 and then decide to upgrade to the Pro version later on, or you can buy the full Pro version for $50 all at once. Now, the reason that I'm introducing Auria Pro here before we get into our tutorial tonight is to re-familiarize all of you with the concept of laying down a track of music or laying down a vocal track. A vocal track can be exactly what you're hearing right now, me speaking to you through my lavalier microphone directly into my camera, or in my case, my iPhone 13 Pro Max. So one of these parts could very well be that. a narration. Now what these are actually is a demo song that Auria Pro provides you with so that you can play with it, mess around with it. Sounds like making mud pies, and you know what I feel about that. So I got a great vibe from this app the second I opened it up. But there is something that separates this app from other recording apps, and I'd like to show you that now. Now up here in the top left-hand corner are various windows that you can go to. Sound familiar? Like the 5 editing windows that you can go to in LumaFusion. But we're not talking about video here. These are all audio tracks, right? You can bring up a keyboard to do a lot of amazing things. We'll cover that later. But where we want to go is to its left, the far left. And we're going to click on that right now. Okay, so don't let this scare you. That has got to be a zillion knobs. And guess what? I could easily add a dozen more. And at first glance, this has got to be confusing. But you see, this is why I like this app. This is a throwback to the old recording boards in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and on. Here we don't see gyroscopic, weird flying things going through the air as you're trying to bring down the mids, like some audio editing apps. No, we don't, do we? Here we have a photorealistic representation of a mixing board. Why do I feel this is important? Because this is where you see, this is where you feel your way as you learn to become a recording engineer. The knobs, the sliders, the inputs are all there. Each and every single one of them have a purpose. Now, the reason I even brought this up in this video is to introduce the idea of editing in Auria Pro. Right now, I'm just in the beginnings of learning Auria Pro, and I don't anticipate too many problems as I start throwing some tracks in there. Of course, as I do, those tutorials will come your way. And not just because we're talking about sound editing. The reason I bring this up is most of the experts out there who are giving advice on how to do a YouTube studio right will be the first to tell you that if your video isn't perfect, but your sound is, versus another video that's beautifully shot with really bad sound, your average viewer will watch the video that doesn't look as good. Now, at first, that may make no sense. YouTube, after all, is primarily a visual media player. But that's how important sound is, and that's how important this tutorial is tonight. So let's get back into LumaFusion, where I'm going to show you what I did to the audio track of our previous video that I just released yesterday. So let's get into LumaFusion and see what we can do with this audio track. So as usual, let's just go up to our app switcher, and we will go ahead and go down to the dock and pick LumaFusion, and it'll load up with our latest project. So here we are. This is the files. This is the actual files of my last video, okay? And as you can see, tons of clips here, right? All right. Just like we've been talking about, now you see in my own videos tons of clips to deal with. And this gets back to some of the tips that we talked about prior to getting into LumaFusion. And if you want those tips, just take a look at tutorial number 10. This is tutorial number 11. Now here you see plenty of clips, don't you? But before I cut up any of those clips, I went in and I took care of my color correction, as I brought up, and we have tutorials on those, where I dealt with my color correction. And don't forget, we have a tutorial playlist on the channel. Take a look at those and you'll be up to date with this video. Anyway, as I've said before, I split my clips after I've done my color correction and after I've taken care of sound. And the reason is, then when you split your clips, they maintain those qualities. What this means to you is you don't have to go back and color correct and sound correct all of these clips later on. Let that be rule number 1. Anything you can do in your first block, do it then, or forever hold your peace. Because that kind of editing is not fun. And boys just want to have fun. Ain't that right, hon?
Yeah. Stay golden, pony boy.
Steak golden, pony boy? You know, I have a brother I say that to. All right, so for reasons we've already discussed, no matter which clip I click on, the sound is going to be right where I left it, okay? Let's double click on one right now. Okay, so once again, we're not in a sound window, are we? And the reason for that was the last time that I was in the editing windows, I was color correcting. And of course, we're into the color and effects editing window. Like I mentioned before, when you double tap on a particular clip, it brings you to an editing window. And what editing window that is depends on where you were before. Now, one of the interesting things about color correction here is if you take a look at it, I have some presets that I use. And in our tutorials, we've discussed how you can develop your own presets. Now, for all of my studio shots here in the studio, I usually use BLFX number 2. BL, of course, is bottom line, and the rest is self-explanatory. But I also have a preset number 1 that I also use for clips that don't quite require so much a heavy touch. Okay, so first of all, this video, it was shot with a 4 megapixel camera that we had just gotten that day, turned it on, and shot from the audience, the whole performance, as people were diving in and out and getting up and everything, and so there's a lot of shaking that I could not eliminate. However, I did bring it into the stabilization window and eliminated a lot of the shake that was originally in this clip. And we'll get into stabilization, we'll get into all of these later. But right now, let's go ahead and click into our sound editing window. So we just take our cursor down, double tap on there, and we're in our sound editing window. This is our sound file. These are the sound limits. This line indicates the level we've chosen to play this sound file at. And of course, we can control that either with our Apple Pencil, as we've discussed, our fingers, or our trackpad by controlling the gain right here. But like in the last video, we're going to the graphic equalizer. Double click, and once again, here you can see all the boring controls that you can control your graphic equalizer if that's your heart's desire. But as I've mentioned, I like to have a little bit more fun, and since LumaFusion will let me have the kind of fun that I like to have, I think we'll go my route this time. You see over here, you get a visualization. Now, if you choose to use these controls, this will change along with using those controls. That's not a problem. But I like to get in and get my hands dirty, and that's where I usually reach for my Apple Pencil. So what we're going to do is we're going to get in here, and I'm going to demonstrate to you just what I've done with this audio file and why. Now, first of all, the audio file was recorded straight into a Roland VS880. The machine was capable of about 20-bit recording. Now, I also had a VS890 for 24-bit recording at my disposal at the time, but I had just gotten the machine and I wasn't familiar with it. We had gotten this gig maybe 2 or 3 days after Garth and I decided to get together and put together an acoustic duo. We had 8 days to get 8 songs together, and you name it, everything went wrong. At the last minute, I had my guitar plugged in to a floor delay that sounded very nice. The lady who you see in those videos who keep coming up to me at the microphone with signs as I'm performing told me, oh, this isn't working or that isn't working. Well, she had told me that we were 30 seconds till air. My equipment failed. I had to unplug all of my floor devices, plug straight into the PA, hit a flat guitar response, and that gives you a lot more information than you need, but basically I did not get the guitar sound that I wanted that night, and I just didn't have the time. So as buskers do, we plodded on. But I did get a clean recording, and though I can't do everything that I want with my guitar in this recording without affecting the guitar that Garth is playing, very careful and very minute adjustments can do wonders. Now, this is an EQ that I've used many times. This is not an EQ that I would use for 2 acoustic guitars and 2 singers. But anything more radical than this either affected the lead vocals or Garth's guitar in a negative way. So admittedly, this is a very gentle EQ adjustment, but it is valid, and I'll show you why. Okay, so like I demonstrated in the last video, I'm going to go ahead and use my Apple Pencil. We've already discussed how I do that, and we'll demonstrate how with your Apple Pencil you can start making sonic adjustments to your video. So when I originally opened up this clip, this was all flatlined here. So you can see I've made some adjustments. First of all, I've rolled off my bass right at the end. We discussed why that was important in the last tutorial. And I've also rolled off my high ends. And again, we discussed that in the last video. I've slightly raised my low ends and my high ends, and then I've dipped my mid frequencies. Yes, this is a smiley-faced EQ. But now if I had my druthers, I would have probably done something more like this. I would have rolled this bass down a bit more, and I would have rolled my highs down a bit more. I would have bumped these up, and with these, I would bring that even a little bit higher, especially when mixing for a guitar player like Garth, because his leads, he gets those really nice high leads. I want those sounds to really carry. Now, if this had been recorded in the studio and I had a hot vocal take, I would be very comfortable in bringing those mids down with the vocals. Here, I had to be very gentle because the mic was not picking me up like it would in the recording studio. We had technical issues. We were almost electrocuted that night setting up our equipment in the rain. But if this was the type of recording that I was going in, I'd bring those mids down even further. I'd bring them down to probably about here. And again, all of this would depend on what guitar I was miking, what mic I was using, the size of the guitar. Is it a dreadnought style? All of these you learn over the years how to mix and how to make them sound and project a bit better. But basically here you do have the control of how your voice is coming over. Do you have a bassier voice? Is your lavalier microphone picking you up and your YouTube videos come out very bassy? Roll them off. Do you have a higher voice? Roll those highs off. And if you have a very direct and present voice, do not be afraid to roll off those mids as well. So that's it in a nutshell. I think it's wonderful that you have these kinds of controls in LumaFusion, primarily a video editing app. And along with limiters and processors and the many other sound advantages that you get with LumaFusion, I gotta tell you, even as a recording engineer, I am impressed. So that about wraps it up for tonight's video. I want to thank you all for taking a look. Once again, a big shout out to our brand new 5 subscribers, and a big thank you to all of our viewers for sharing our videos. And just one more invitation. If you've been considering subscribing to the channel, just hit that subscribe button, hit that top bell notification, and you'll be notified of all future videos. This is The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland, and we'll see you down the road.
It's time to set it.